Good day to all those who have joined us online. I think this panel that we're about to begin, Accelerating Caribbean Internet Infrastructure, IXPs, ASNs, and Network Autonomy and Resilience, actually flows very well in the general theme of this year's Internet Governance Forum. The group that has so graciously agreed to join us this evening know much about the subject, and I think will be quite capable of guiding us through some of the very real world issues being faced across the region as it relates to building out Caribbean internet infrastructure. I'm being joined this afternoon by Mr. Junior McIntyre, an ICT consultant at the CTU, Mr. Kevon Swift of LACNIC, whom you've met before and who played a key role in yesterday's proceedings, Mr. Sebastien Hamlet from the Collective of St. Martin, French West Indies, and Mr. Brent McIntosh, who is responsible for infrastructure, design, build out, and advisory services under the CaribNOG banner, and who himself is a very reputable network engineer and experienced practitioner in the field. So we want to have what I hope will be a very interactive discussion. I will set some context, but the request I made to the panelists is that we will all be sharing very interactively around the subject, and hopefully you, the participants, will also join us in this conversation. I think as many of you are aware, the CTU for some time now has played a very critical role under the guidance of former Secretary General Bernadette Lewis in raising awareness across the region about the importance of local internet infrastructure and specifically about the importance of domestic internet traffic exchange. And while in this panel, we're not going to go into the technical details of how you set up an IXP and how you go about building and growing one, we do want to look at the implications of internet exchange points on the current Caribbean context that we find ourselves in. And I think if you consider the almost traumatic move that we've had to make toward getting services online, this subject, accelerating Caribbean internet infrastructure, is actually one of the more fundamental or foundation layer discussions as it pertains to how the Caribbean moves to an accelerated movement to online services and the Caribbean digital economy. That future, that thing that was always afar off that we were hoping for and building toward, has come upon us suddenly as a result of the COVID pandemic. And so if we just look at the traffic patterns globally, and some of the panelists will also confirm that this is what we are also seeing on Caribbean networks, you can see the COVID effect. Online traffic or internet traffic as recorded by Cloudflare, one of the world's largest content delivery networks, shows an upward and to the right spike that coincides with the global outbreak. For the Caribbean, what this means or what this has meant is that we have been seeing the rapid transition to online services, and that is obviously as a result of the public health and safety measures that had to be taken that shut down offices and sent citizens home. But that has also produced a greater reliance and sensitivity to, I should say, the quality of internet services. People are much more sensitive now that everything depends on the quality of that connection: schooling, healthcare, staying in contact with friends and family, continuing business operations, and basically life has moved to a much greater degree to online interactions. And so there's a greater sensitivity across the region as to what is responsible for good and bad internet service, what is causing poor and high quality internet service. And we're seeing that reflected in comments, not just on social media, but demands and requests to internet service providers and also to regulators across the region. There's also been a greater demand for local online services. The era of easily getting stuff from trips to the United States or the UK, the era of easily receiving packages from US-based or foreign-based merchants is giving way to a greater demand for what does the corner store have to offer, and how quickly and easily can I get that without having to endanger myself or my loved ones. People are asking questions, why can't we get more of our government services online without having to endanger ourselves in standing in line? Courts are asking, how can we facilitate online trials and hearings without having to have people go into cramped spaces and buildings? The sum total of it is more local online services are in demand than at any other point in our internet history as a region. This has put a spotlight on the increased requirement for robust and resilient local network infrastructure. And it is something that would not have ordinarily been a cry or concern of the public or of most organizations. But because of this importance, this spotlight on getting services online and having them work well and having them reliably accessed, questions are being asked of and networks are being tested. And of course, all of this is happening not just with COVID as the looming crisis of the day, but we're inside of a hurricane season. And as more stuff gets put online, people want the assurance, governments want the assurance, businesses want the assurance that these digital services can continue or at least can be recovered very quickly if they were interrupted or disrupted. And then I'll conclude by saying the urgent demand to provide secure local connectivity. As more services go online, as more governments repose trust in the network, questions around the security of the network, the stability of the network become paramount. And these conversations have also led to a greater scrutiny of how the networks are being built out, how they're being managed, and how they're being maintained. So if we sum up the COVID effect of an upward increase or growth in the utilization of online services and growth in internet traffic across the region, and we map it against these realities, more online services, greater sensitivity of customers, consumers, governments, businesses to the quality of the service, greater demand for local online services, and a greater expectation of a dependable, robust, resilient local network infrastructure. We can see how much COVID has changed in the past 4 or 5 months, discussions that have been ongoing for the past 5, 10, and in some cases, 15 years. We have to find a solution. And so this conversation as part of the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum really fits squarely inside of what a community like this has always been grappling with. And now we want not just discussions, but answers that lead to immediate action. So if we look at this chart, we can see the hierarchy, if you will, of where that need is, where the demand is at the top in internet services, and how it flows or how it stacks on top of a set of required or requisite components that must be in place for the region to continue delivering services in a reliable way. So local internet infrastructure has to be built on local traffic exchange, domestic traffic exchange across domestic networks, getting to domestic consumers is one of the priorities of this seasonal context within which we find ourselves. And at the core or root of that is the issue of the internet exchange points. And several persons in this panel, and I know several in the audience, would have long been champions of the fact that IXPs are not a panacea, they're not a cure-all, they're not a magic bullet. They exist in a context, and that context has blossomed and is now in front of us like never before. The context is one in which the society depends on internet services for life. And that's where we are right now. So around the exchange point, there are issues that this panel will be discussing and that we will be opening up to the participants around the governance of exchange points, the issues of domain name services and internet caches, building out or propagating more local autonomous networks to connect to IXPs, and of course the issue of local network infrastructure, which we heard some of the discussions this morning refer to the need to build out local networks and ensure that those networks are properly resilient and reliable. The bottom line is this: rapid transition to online services must be built on investment in local technology infrastructure. And that's what we want to look at. And I hope this context setting is useful to everyone. As I said, we're not going to be dwelling on many charts and graphs. We're going to be talking about real world in the trenches experiences this afternoon. And so what I will do in terms of setting the context for those conversations is give you a quick sense of what's happening in the region. The countries that have not yet built or properly established their internet exchange points have recognized that they are at a disadvantage. There are issues around putting things on the local network that expect or require a certain degree of resilience of that network. The inefficiency of sending traffic outside of a country only to bring it back in has been exposed through this pandemic. And through the experience of ordinary users trying to understand, well, why are things not as fast or as quick or as reliable as they would have been? The tolerance for inefficiency has diminished. The limited capacity to deploy locally optimized services. You have entrepreneurs across the region proposing tools and applications that can help with everything from contact tracing to supermarket or corner store goods deliveries. But they have to get them onto networks that are not yet ready in some cases. And they have to get them through internet service providers who in some cases are also not prepared or structured to onboard or provision those local applications. And that's one of the things that we want to look at in our conversation today. The needless export of capital to countries that already have IXPs, those in the north, in the United States or in Europe, where traffic must be exchanged to get back to a country that does not have an exchange point. I'm sure Brent will mention in his talk the fact that any internet traffic has to pass through at some point an internet exchange point. The only question is if it's a near exchange point or a far away exchange point. And so when you're sending, the further you send it, the more expensive it is. And that's what we mean when we say the needless export of capital for traffic that should not be going out of a local jurisdiction. And then of course, the security issue has come up over and over again over the past several months as cabinets put sensitive cabinet data on the internet, as companies start to place greater reliance on the cloud and cloud computing and cloud services. Question marks over, can we keep it local? Does this have to go into jurisdictions where we have no control over the legality or the scrutiny or the interrogation that might take place in those jurisdictions? All of these issues are front and center inside of the move to rapid online transition. So what does that take us to in terms of this conversation about the role of internet exchange points and critical internet infrastructure in the region? Well, the primary role of an exchange point is to keep local traffic local. That's the bottom line. It's as simple as that. It really is not a fancy or convoluted role that IXPs play. In playing that role of keeping local traffic local, they reduce the cost and increase the efficiency of local internet services. And that's the objective. The picture can be thought of like this, as a bending arrow that goes from establishing a local peering facility, an IXP, building out the content that lives on and takes advantage of that high bandwidth factory within country, and the commerce that gets built on top of that. All of these together constitute what many have referred to over the years as the domestic internet economy. And that's where we are now with other aspects of our economy and economic activity shut down or severely constrained. The focus is how can we rapidly stand up a domestic internet economy where local transactions targeting local consumers, delivering local content can be delivered across local networks. And that's where we'll be drawing a lot of our focus today. Without it, what happens? Well, for those countries that already don't have exchange points or who have non-functioning or underperforming exchange points, they are already aware that it's expensive to send the traffic out. The reliability of the service depends on networks in other lands and territories. The security issue remains an open door. Consumption patterns, which were once tailored to and inclined toward foreign online services, must now be shifted. These are some of the concerns that the panel will be looking at as we go through our discussion. The good news is that successful Caribbean IXP and infrastructure models already exist. And that's why I really think that it's a positive for us to have this conversation here as part of the 16th Internet Governance Forum, because we do have stories to share. we do have models that will benefit the entire region to expose the forum to. And that's what we want to get into our conversation. If you look at where the IXP momentum has taken place, you see standout countries like Belize, Curacao, Grenada, Haiti, St. Martin, having successfully deployed and are successfully managing exchange points. And these can be juxtaposed against those who are still optimizing their exchange points, like Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, and working out what works and what doesn't work. Why do things fail? What causes growth? How do we properly govern and steward the increasing relevance of a local peering facility that allows us to build out local content and local services? That's what we are seeing in this map, or in this pattern that exists. More local bandwidth available to the countries that have functional internet exchange points, more local traffic, spikes very consistent with developed countries throughout the COVID period as the pandemic lays hold, or as spikes take place. Local internet traffic grows. People have the assurance of having local content delivered across local networks. And for those that are struggling, the degradation of the network, the diminishing quality of service when you have spikes in local demand and local consumption. But if you also look at this, this graphic, you can see a picture of the region moving to action. You have a number of in-progress IXP initiatives. You have a number of in-progress initiatives to strengthen existing exchange points and to understand the economics and the management principles of governing the exchange point. And so we want to build on these references. We want to build on these models and build on these examples and experiences as the panel shares. This is the panel discussion at the 16th Internet Caribbean Internet Governance Forum, looking at accelerating Caribbean internet infrastructure. And to get things going, I want Junior McIntyre of the CTU to share the results of a survey that was recently conducted that paints a very interesting picture, I should say, as to the state of play across the region. And then we will move to Brent McIntosh, who will share some tales from the trenches. And we'll take the conversation from there. So Junior, I want to invite you to, and of course we have Kevon Swift of LACNIC and Jean Sebastien, who also have very interesting and unique perspectives on the role of infrastructure, number resources, network autonomy that we want to weave into our conversation. But first, we'll start with Junior and get some results from a survey that was recently done and use that as a platform to have some of the experiences. So Brent, you want to share with us some of the experiences that you've been seeing out in the field as part of the CaribNOG team looking at infrastructure and part of your own consultancy supporting network build-outs across the region?
Excellent. Thank you, Bevil. Good afternoon, panel and viewers all, attendees. So, Bevil, first off, I want to say that initial presentation really covered the key areas, which we need to discuss and drill down as to how we can further develop IXPs in the region. So, while there's a lot of good news, today as well, I want to chat a little bit about what the barriers to entry or what has been the obstacles we're seeing in the Caribbean region, especially, of course, in the English Caribbean. And, these discussions are great because, as Kevon might have, similar and maybe different experiences as well that I want to discuss and hear about today as well. So let me start a little bit on the positive. So, of course, the list of, IXPs you've mentioned, we're seeing, additional ones in the case of BVI. BVI, we've been working, closely with BVI as part of CaribNOG and developing their IX. BVI, of course, is a small island, but what was, brilliantly done with BVI is that they studied for the last few years the best way to deploy an IXP. So they would have looked at, the best current operational practices that's required. They built a 10 gig infrastructure. They ensured they placed a separate management network. They requested, autonomous systems, IP address ranges, both V4 and V6 from ARIN to cater for a proper IX, just like the big guys, the DCIX, the Lynx, the AM6. And, that's going great. But what has been the challenges in the Caribbean? So the physical was done, critical infrastructure put in place, CDNs contacted, but what has been the challenge? So here comes the meeting with the stakeholders. And, it's very simple things. For example, I am going to join the IXP, but as an ISP, the government has to ensure that they come to us to pay for, a connection to the IXP. So you've been finding a lot of barriers. And what I'm gathering is that there is not, in terms of ISPs, there is no regional, transformational strategy for IXP integration into a core network. And, Bevil, based on the presentation you gave, it's foretelling that part of your digital strategy as it concerns your network core absolutely must have a component of integrating or connecting to an IXP. So here, there's great infrastructure being built out, but the challenge is now getting regional ISPs to ensure part of the strategies to having IXPs be part of their core network. How can we address this? And this is one of the things I really hope we can discuss today. Do we have meetings specifically for Caribbean ISPs? We have ISPX that has no issue pairing in Grenada, but in another island, maybe somewhere far in the north, we're not going to pair. But why is that? Why aren't we all aligned on what we want to do, right? Second thing, as it concerns governments being part of an IXP, with the COVID scenario we're seeing, tablets, thousands of tablets being handed out to schools. Students are going to be using these tablets to access their digital library for their coursework, their school books. But at the end of the day, there is still not a firm, solid, government content platform, that these tablets can access locally. Again, further enhancing the user experience and development of other local school-related content to support, e-learning as it concerns local schools. I think in Dubai, since COVID, their decision was to do full e-learning, full remote school. Google did, tons of developments there to ensure that, all the required content like Google Classroom can all be accessed locally. So that's it for that part of it. Suriname now, they're absolutely seeing the need. Tons of bandwidth being transited through interconnection points in Florida and the US, and a lot of that traffic can be offloaded locally. So Suriname government has seen the need. The IXP is important. ISPs are on board, but their challenge now is ensuring they build a correct the right size infrastructure to support that bandwidth need. And I want to touch a little bit on cost as well. I've been working through the figures, and it will vary per ISP, but transit costs are not getting any cheaper. Today, a 10 gig internet link from anywhere in the Caribbean to Florida is somewhere in the region of $40,000 US per month. If you do the math, that's ridiculous. That's a heavy cost. You have some ISPs that needs to get maybe 2, 3, or 4 of these links to ensure they have diversity and full network resilience. Yes, but what about an IXP in your local country that can host the same content, the same popular content that you wanna access? This is where that part of the strategy comes into play. We must connect to an IXP to make our network not just resilient, but better performing, giving end users a better quality of experience. No, that is where I want to touch on Trinidad, right? And this is what we're seeing, because, as opposed from focusing a lot on building out 10 gig net IXPs, multiple 10 gig IXPs, we're focusing on what we're not doing right in the Caribbean now. And that's part of, our strategy to help improve IXs as we work and support the working groups who are building them out. Trinidad. Now, I pick on Trinidad because I think Trinidad has the best use case in the Caribbean, right? We have the AM6 Caribbean that operates off of Curacao, that's serving at peak maybe 28 gigs of internet content, locally, local exchange plus caching. 28 gigs for a very small island, 155,000 people, maybe 70,000, 80,000 end users. Trinidad, on the other hand, has 1.3 million people. And from looking at statistics from ISPs, the Trinidad ISPs together may be already generating half a terabit, 500 gigabits of traffic just from CDNs alone. Half a terabit of traffic, that's huge. But why is this not being shared? Why is this not being served, from the internet exchange? And I think this is one of the bigger challenges. Trinidad has 2 beautiful internet exchange points, strategically located, but I'm seeing a developmental infrastructure challenge by this particular IX, or these IXs in Trinidad not being run or not being deployed to serve more local content. And also more CDN type content. Yes, we understand, and it's a challenge in other parts of the world where ISPs, because of their size, are already hosting the popular CDNs like Google, Facebook, Akamai, Netflix, and soon to come, of course, the bigger ones like O365, Cloudflare. But there is still the competitive mindset and not a collaborative one. And we see that happening in small countries and the larger ones. Now, I'm thinking that Trinidad government bodies have to find a way to ensure they can at least have a certain CDN providers, if not all, being located and serving traffic from the IXP. Because I can tell you one of the advantages you gain from that is that it's not only that you improve your resilience, you take a strain off your network. You take a major strain off your network, not just from traffic, but there's also power cooling. And in the case of disaster planning, right? You lose a link, then fine. You can have a redundant connection to the internet exchange as well, right? Which helps further build your resilience stance. And I think Trinidad is close to heart because I know a lot of the brilliant technical minds there. But it's just that social engineering part that we need to look at to see how we can make Trinidad the best IX. And Trinidad has a right to be the best, to have the best IXP in the Caribbean, just on the way in which they set up and the internet usage type, internet usage patterns. Lots of gaming. I think it's probably one of the Caribbean that maybe has the highest, gaming volume. As well as streaming. So I think that's one of the things that would always be such a maybe contentious in the discussion because it's still a very fair playing field. But you have those very same providers that are so collaborative in Grenada. And I would go as far as to call the names. You have your Flow, you have your Digicel, you have your Green Dots. These guys are always ready and willing to help. Build out the IXPs and support in Grenada. So why not this consistent sort of mindset throughout the entire Caribbean? And I know there's a business, and the revenue side of that, but there are more benefits to gain from an IXP as opposed to not having it built out properly. So these are the things we're seeing. And again, I'm just going to go up a little higher in the Caribbean, and every island has a unique situation, right? In the past, let's take, for example, the St. Vincent Internet Exchange, which I think is a very important internet exchange now, which would support a lot in terms of the CARSIPS project for, e-gov services, online services for schools and all that. St. Vincent, small island, but of course, many islands. That said, I think St. Vincent already had ISPs already connecting and sharing traffic, no problems at all. Now, we decided, fine, we need to bring St. Vincent to deployment status whereby it's being managed by a separate entity. It's basically run itself. St. Vincent IXP is going to get its own ASN because it's going to use a route server to help advertise routes to everyone, and support local CDNs. So about a month ago, St. Vincent IX got a first request, for a local content partner, someone who's going to provide local streaming services and all those great applications. Oh yeah, but you know what? We just got infrastructure ready, but the providers, they need to disconnect the links, re-IP their networks. And we're saying that because in the past, it was a good faith gesture where one ISP would have lent its IP, a small IP address pool for pairing. Now St. Vincent got their own, and now they have to, renumber their IXP and have providers, re-IP their routers, their parent routers. But that has been proving to be a challenge. Yes, of course, the parties are very willing, but it is a challenge of getting everyone to see it as a priority. So there, which is one of a rare thing, because I say rare because, there you have a local CDN ready to go and we can't really get them on board as fast as we want to. So there's a lot of different challenges. They vary throughout every island, it's different. But at the end of the day, the expectation and the end result that we're looking for, is going to be the same. Serve high quality local content, serve traffic locally, provide critical infrastructure that I always talk about. Bevil mentioned, at some point traffic will always pass through an IX, but let it pass through yours, even your DNS request. And I think that's one of the things every IXP is going to have in very short term. Their own, root servers, which helps a lot with security. One more thing I want to mention just before we go to Junior, because I'm really dying to, I've been thinking about that survey since last night, so I'm really dying to see the results. But I just want to mention another thing. I've been following the major IXs around the world, Lynx, AM6, DC, IX, and they have taken internet exchange to a whole new level. So my dream was for the Caribbean IXP infrastructures to be at a very smaller scale, but almost at the same level as these IXs, but we're still a few years behind because we have not gotten to where we should have been. So now you're seeing these major IXs doing what you call, virtual transit links. They're offering, automated services, automated, IX as a service, all these wonderful services, right? While most of them are for profit, these are services, yes, that, not-for-profit exchanges as we have in the Caribbean, can do. And will we get there? Yes. But the only how we can get to that point is to get these infrastructures in place so we can move from our local traffic exchange or local CDNs or local content and get to the next level where I can say, you know what, there's a 10 gig link between Grenada and Trinidad. I am a new business partner that has tons of customers in Trinidad. I want a virtual IX link into Trinidad. And these two IXPs can collaborate and provide that service because they're doing it based on a partnership level. DCIX has, partnered with Lynx and other transit carriers, and that's where we want to get to. It's a case where we're trying to help each other develop Caribbean infrastructure. Lots of great things IXPs can do. I mean, we're just scratching the surface here. But again, the world will never be the same in terms of the way we access and use content. I mean, seen from since COVID. But this is where we need to get to. So I'm going to stop here for now, and let's move on to Junior because we really want to see that the results of that survey, and then we can take up the discussion.
Yeah, thanks much, Brent. And take a look at the questions that are flowing in, so we can start preparing to give responses. Junior, you're up. We're looking forward to hearing what you've discovered as part of the CTU's recent survey on the state of Caribbean IXP. So over to you.
Okay, thank you, Bevil. Great, you all are seeing my screen, right? Yeah. Okay, so as Bevil indicated, The CTU has been a long-standing partner with a number of IXP stakeholders, or a number of critical internet stakeholders in the region, including ARIN, LACNIC, CaribNOG, CARSIP, CARPIF, and our members or member countries. So we have been asked to, more or less, the CTU continue the work of the whole notion of proliferating regional IXPs, local IXPs, of course, into a collective set of IXPs that are more collaborative, work together in harmony, and, leverage efficiencies, promote entrepreneurship, and Bevil would have spoken to all of these things. So this first chart really depicts the vision and objective, and you could see how IXPs, a cluster of national IXPs, and a cluster of IXPs across the region, pairing with each other, can impact government, research, tourism, hospitals, factories, all the various sectors, and IXPs lying at the center of that ecosystem. And so what we decided to do as part of the project would be to start with a survey, starting with the first principles to determine where we are, what's the baseline. And so we decided, okay, let's move forward with a survey, administer the survey. And the survey focused on 4 key areas, groupings: policy perspectives in terms of the role of the IXP, technical considerations, growth and sustainability, and measuring the impact. And so when we administered the survey, we reached out to about 15 territories of our members. And the thing is, it was a bit of short notice. So we did well. Within a week, we were able to get at least 6 respondents. And of course, we follow up with the other territories to get their responses. So we got responses from 6 territories. And so that is what you'll be seeing today, the IXPs that are located in these respective territories. The first question that deals with IXP governance was asked in terms of, is there an appointed or dedicated IXP coordinator? And 67% indicated yes, 33% says no. And I will just go through the slides and just share the results without coming up with an analysis, but I'm sure you'll be able to paint a picture and to see some of the challenges that Brent had mentioned, as well as Bevil. The next question would have been, in terms of governance again, is there an IXP oversight team? Well, we got 83% saying yes, 17% saying no. All right, so we're seeing clearly there is a need to support the IXPs, especially in terms of oversight and governance. The 4th question says, if yes to question 1, if the answer is yes to the above, how does the team meet? How often does the team meet? And we got varied responses. Most of the responses, 33%, said once a year. And we have once a month in one case, other cases every quarter, every 6 months, and even in some cases not at all. All right, so governance, we know governance is something that we need to clearly pay attention to. From policy perspectives, the question would have been, is there a written peering agreement? We got 67% said yes, 33% said no, there isn't a written peering agreement. All right, in terms of growth and sustainability of the IXP operations, the question would have been, how many types of participants are connected to your IX? And we gave a few types. We identified network operators. So 33% of the respondents said, yes, we have network operators attached, connected to IX. 100% said service providers, which is expected, ISPs, internet service providers. 67% said international content providers. 50% said local content providers. 50% said government agencies. 33% said academic institutions, and there were some others, all right, that would have been listed, which is a smaller percentage, 17. Moving quickly on to same area, growth and sustainability. The next question would be, to what extent do you agree that the following growth enablers have been adopted at your IXP? So we identified some key growth enablers and we gave a scale response. So the first one would have been a flexible peering and membership policy. Is that adopted? Has that been adopted? And would you agree that has been adopted at your IX? So 67% said, well, they strongly agree that it has been, and oops, right. And then as well for the other question, local champion, is there a local champion who helps promote the IX? 67% says strongly, 33 says agree. All right, so when you're moving on to community building efforts and fostering trust among collaborators and peering partners, you had 50% agree, strongly agree, 33% says agree, but then you have a 17% says they disagree. That is not something that that is really adopted at my IX. All right, and we could ask further questions as to why, but this was just to get an initial response. Again, a neutral hosting institution is IXP hosted at a neutral site. Again, we have 50 and 33% agreeing, and then we have 17% to somewhat, to a lesser extent. And again, is an enabling policy environment for growing the internet sector, including low-cost connected to your IX. Is there a policy that supports that? Again, that is agree in general. All right, strongly and agree. And again, there's another question here. IPv6 compliant do you agree that a growth enabler such as IPv6 compliant as your IXP is at a minimum installed and operating on an operating system? Well, we have varied responses. We said 33% says, well, no. And I suppose we could assume why. All right, and in terms of as fast as the ISPs adopt IPv6, then you will certainly see growth because they are a larger constituent of the IXP hosting. And then you have, to a lesser extent, strongly disagree, and well, you have strongly, you have a disagree and to some extent. So we're seeing a picture there being shaped. Some technical considerations to support Caribbean IXP development. Another question is, which of the following secondary service does your IXP provide? And we have, Looking Glass, we have 100% that says no. Then we have routing services, DNS, root and country level the domains, country level top domains. We have 100%. We have time servers, 50% said yes, 50% said no. And there's some none of the above varies. All right, so you can see in most cases, the DNS root servers and the top level country domains and the root servers have been more or less fully adopted with those respondents in some other areas. So we just kind of sample some areas just to get a snapshot of where they are. All right, results-based measures in the impact of the IXP. So we asked a question around that. The question is, are any of the following indicators used to aid in tracking the growth and impact of your IXP? All right, so we're thinking about sustainability here. And so yes or no questions. Number of root server instances, yes, that is used to track. If that is growing, that is increasing peak traffic at your IXP, 100% said yes. Request to peer ISPs, if you're constantly new requests coming in and CDNs coming in, and say yes, we use that to track to see our level of growth and impact, and so on. And you could look at the various questions or sections in the questions. Average access speed, that is checked. Brent would have been talking about that. Major local entities with non-local websites. Number of locally hosted major websites. Brent touched on that in his presentation. All right, 67% said yes, that is used to measure and track the impact as an indicator. A number of international content providers present. All right, so we're getting a sense of where we are. In terms of peering dynamics, please read the question would have been, please read the extent to which the following describes the preferred peering policy positions in peering arrangements at your IXPs. And so it's varied in this case. We have, in terms of strongly agree and agree, we have, yes, they improve, the objective is to improve end user experience, to lower transit costs, as Bevil said, to, sender keeps all is to a lesser extent, usage billing to increase revenue by peering. So the questions are nuanced in a way, there's subtle differences, but they have some focus areas just to get a sense and to have the start us thinking about what areas we need to kind of drill down into. Net settlement based on traffic exchange, and you would see, it varies. One of the responses is to sell more underlying transport capacity is in most cases somewhat and disagree to a large extent. So that isn't really a position, but you would, and as well as net settlement based on traffic exchange, that also isn't really, to some extent, something that is really focused on in terms of our policy position for peering. And there are more. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just some areas we sampled out to kind of focus on. Other peering dynamic would be question. Please read the extent to which the following describes your IXP's peering policy or carrier peering agreements. Similar but slightly different to the previous questions. There are no peering arrangements or internet carrier exchange for traffic, so there are no arrangements. So that's 50-50, halfway, the even split. Bilateral peering, that is participants pair with each other according to their own requirements and business relationships. Yeah, that is 80% strongly agree, so that is significantly adopted. Voluntary, multilateral, again, we have 40%. And then, mandatory is really somewhat and to strongly disagree. So that is discouraged. That is not something that is considered at all. So we're scanning the environment. Almost there to the end. This question says, please rate the extent to which the following peering models are practiced, and whether it's closed peering. We have some agreement there, closed peering, IXPs, ISPs decides who it peer partners are, and is generally not open to peering opportunities. So we have a 33% said they strongly agree, 33% yes, that's the case, and they disagree. In terms of the rate in terms of the rate or the extent to which the following peering models practice have been adopted, or practice at the IXP. We have open peering. So a lot to do with selective peering is fairly strongly agreed that is practice. Open peering, you're amenable to that, as well as to peer with other Caribbean IXPs. All right, so that is all right, okay, I think, all right, so, all right, so, these are some questions that we asked to kind of pry out, to tease out responses, okay? And other question would be in terms of IXP structure, the structure of the IXP, please read the extent to which the following describes your institutional and operational model that you have adopted. And we have 50-50 in terms of being an informal association of networks, whether it's university or government agency, that is certainly not the case. Disagree, 50% and strongly disagree. That hasn't been adopted. Whether it's an operator, neutral, or commercial or for-profit company, that is, again, split even, 50-50. And then an industry association of ISPs. Well, we're seeing strongly agree here, all right? And not-for-profit independent organization, 83%. Okay, so you're seeing some varied responses here. And of course, we have to drill down and inquire. So this just gives us these responses just give us an initial sense. All right, and yeah, I think I would have gone through this already. All right, yeah. Right, and this question says, please read the extent to which you agree that any of the following will be beneficial to strengthen your IXPs, and these are future-looking questions. Your IXP, basically, IXP website, will that be beneficial? Training programs for IXP operators, will that be beneficial? And Caribbean Association for IXP. So we clearly see the responses there, and they give us an indication. And this is just quickly my last slide. The stages of the project. So we started with a survey, an initial survey, and we intend to follow up with focus group meetings and interactions with the IXPs and the stakeholders that I mentioned from the start of the presentation in the region. And we want to widen that collaboration with some other IXP projects that are on the card. In particular, the project with the French Caribbean speaking territories. And then we want to really take the policy positions and prescriptions to the General Conference of Ministers for ratification and stuff. So at the end of the day, we want to take all the issues back to our members, and it originated from them. you know, they saw the need for, you know, us to work closely with the territories as it, you know, as it relates to the IXP community. And so that will be the general approach that we will be taking. All right, so I mean, that's it in terms of the stats.
Thank you very much, Junior. The statistics that the CTU survey has brought on confirmed what the CaribNOG community and the Caribbean Peering Forum community were seeing. And there are two very important points I want to pull out from what Junior just shared. One is that the IXPs that are performing best, where performance is measured both in terms of traffic growth over the exchange point and contribution to local bandwidth, are the ones with the most diverse membership. So where you have not just incumbent ISPs, but you also have other content providers and content delivery networks peering at the exchange. And the second significant point, I think, has to do with the ones that are performing best also are the ones, without exception, with without exception with dedicated peering coordinators. Now, one of the questions that keeps recurring is how do you get to participate at an exchange point? And I want to invite Kevon Swift of LACNIC, one of the regional internet registries, one of two regional internet registries serving the Caribbean, to share a bit on the issue of exchange points, autonomous system numbers, and even IP numbers as part of that equation in terms of a successful IXP. Kevon, if you can introduce the concept of the regional internet registry and the utility and value of number resources to the process of building out and accelerating Caribbean internet infrastructure.
Great, thanks very much for that introduction, Bevil, and of course, thanks to the CTU for this opportunity to present here this afternoon. Great, thank you very much. So as Bevil mentioned, I really just wanted to seek the attendees' indulgence in taking a couple of steps back and touching on some of the more foundational concepts to the topic that we are discussing today. I'm always very cognizant that this may be the very first time that some people are participating at the Caribbean IGF, and in particular, hearing these sorts of discussions. So this step back is very useful to understand and to contextualize a bit more all of the stats and the information I was given regarding the growth and the state of Caribbean internet infrastructure. So as Bevil mentioned, I am from LACNIC, which is one of two regional internet registries that provide service to the Caribbean. And this afternoon, I just really want to focus on one of the points you're seeing here on the screen, which deals with network autonomy and the benefits of getting your own internet resources directly from LACNIC. The arguments I'm going to give here are applicable similarly to anyone who wants to get resources from ARIN or any of the registries, as a matter of fact. And then I just have about two key messages that I wanted to share on IXPs. I think a lot of the information about IXPs have already been covered, so I'm not going to repeat myself or repeat what had been raised before. So resources directly from LACNIC, and when we talk about resources, of course, we are all familiar with the whole idea of IPv4 and IPv6 address space. As some of you may have heard when I addressed the audience yesterday, we at LACNIC are now completely at exhaustion point for IPv4 within our region. So what that means that we have no more IPv4 space in the free aggregate pool, and therefore, in order to get IPv4, there is a waiting list system in place for what will eventually be returned and revoked IPv4 resources, and we can anticipate that that would increase as more and more organizations deploy IPv6, but that is a waiting list. Separate from the waiting list is the secondary market. Recently, LACNIC implemented a policy where we can allow transfers with 3 other RIR regions. So it's easy to be able to get resources from any of the participating RIR regions, have them registered at LACNIC and use them within your organizations. And then we have here autonomous system numbers, which in very simple terms are numbers that allow autonomous systems or networks visibility on global internet routing tables. And at this juncture, where we are talking about no more IPv4s, an abundance of IPv6, where in the LACNIC region, more than 95% of our membership already have IPv6. The stats on how well they're deploying them is somewhat different. This is probably one of the best times to really undertake a reformulation or a revision of how we number devices and equipment within a network. And that there, Bevil has mentioned it before, because of the pandemic, we're seeing a huge uptick in the technological and the internet services that are being accessed. This is the best time to do such an exercise. And on that point, the first benefit I wanted to discuss with you here is about greater network management efficiency when it comes to IP numbering. So you actually have an opportunity here to talk about better fit for purpose numbering plans. One of the key fundamental differences between IPv4 and IPv6 is this approach to how they are managed. In IPv4, we are from a position of scarcity management. In IPv6, not so much, because we have so much IPv6, we don't see it running out in the foreseeable future. So this gives an organization a key opportunity to get in control of their numbering plans. So not necessarily depend on an upstream provider, but get in direct control of the numbering plans and contemplate other issues such as public versus private IPs, which are the devices or equipment that you want to be seen available on the public internet, what you want to remain within private, how you intend to set up your systems, possibly including cloud services, public-private hybrid, on, offshore, and of course, how you will assign IPv4s versus IPv6. I could assume that given scarcity of IPv4, you may defer IPv4 for decisions on private IPs, whereas IPv6 would be more appropriate for public accessible devices. There's also a clear advantage for organizations having direct control or having resources directly from us when it comes to changing an upstream provider. So an organization may want to change its upstream provider for a number of reasons. You won't have to go through the process of having to return all of your resources and then get them from another provider. You maintain control of how you number the equipment and devices within your network by virtue of getting resources directly from us. And when I say us, from the regional internet registry. And the third point here deals with multi-homing. So you could imagine if you are a government agency that has e-government services available, multi-homing is a technique that will ensure that your service is highly reliable and it works well in terms of performance. So I'll just leave that there for now. Autonomy, the same point that I mentioned before with regard to ASNs, it's the direct visibility within the internet ecosystem. When you have an ASN, you no longer are aggregated under an ISP's ASN, so you get immediate and clear visibility on the global public internet. And that sort of autonomy is very useful when it comes to decisions about CDNs or adding or acquiring value-added services to whatever your technical operation is. So you can imagine that a CDN will need to measure traffic, or I just say that you need to have a firm grasp of your traffic management if you're trying to build a case for inviting a CDN to establish a cache or whatever at your premises. And with your own IXP, those measurements are accurate because you're not being aggregated with your own ASN. Those measurements are accurate because you're not being aggregated with other traffic under an ISP's ASN. And of course, you really need to get your own resources if you're thinking about interconnecting with other operators, if you're trying to join IXP, whether the arrangement of the IXP is that everyone pursues bilateral agreements or multilateral, you need to be able to have your own, resources to be able to do so and to also pair with other organizations. And I have put here that in particular, LACNIC has some privileges, or I should say priority for operators of critical infrastructure for them to get IPs. IPv4s was really the applicable case at the time. That privilege still remains once the entity is classified as an operator of critical infrastructure. So to remind everyone here, when we talk at the Internet Registry about our members, for the most part, our members are ISPs. But beyond ISPs, there's another category of member that we refer to as end users. And they're not end users in a layman's sense as someone who's behind a computer. An end user for a regional Internet registry really deals with a number of other types of organizations, which may be universities, government networks, banks, what have you, that instead of the process where we say, instead of allocating resource space to them, we assign resource space to them. And the idea is that they will be the last point for that resource space to be used. When we allocate to an ISP, it's anticipated that those numbers will be further distributed down the line to their customers, business customers, residential customers, and the like. So I'm going to wrap up soon because I know we spoke a lot about IXP, so I'm not going to cover some of these basics. What I do want to leave with you on the question of IXPs is the question of the members and really getting value out of an IXP. We need to think very, very concretely about content providers. When we talk about keeping local traffic local, content is where it's at. And that content, I'm talking about a number of various types of organizations that need to be at the table at the IXP in order for this concept to really, in order for us to really derive value from the business operation of an IXP. So when I talk about content providers, I'm thinking in my head of universities, NRENs, which are National Research Education Networks, because they really put a lot of information of our content there. I'm talking about government networks. I gave you the example before of a government agency that is trying to establish and set up e-government services, media, TV and production, TV and film production companies, for instance. You will want them as a member at the IXP, and there are a number of other entities that you want at an IXP to really bring home the sense of keeping local traffic locally. Because outside of that, you will remain with the same situation where we are still having operators paying for transit costs to exchange, well, at least to access content that's somewhere outside of this jurisdiction. And when you have situations such as natural disasters and the like, that does bring the access to those internet services to a severe halt. When you think of an IXP and you think of local content, in the event that this country, Trinidad and Tobago, were to be cut off from the global internet, you can still have services up and running, and it's very critical in the first steps after a hurricane that we have access to information, we have the know-hows on how to get this, how to get that, how to get assistance from the government, and that is very, very important in terms of keeping that content local. So we're talking IXPs, we're talking about local content. Let us not just think about the great CDNs, the Googles, the Akamais and such. Let us really think about that content base and having that content base remain local and grow locally as well, and being able to be resilient in the face of natural disasters. And without further ado, I think I will stop there because I'm really looking forward to some of the discussions that will come up afterwards. And I am very keen on hearing the intervention from our colleague from the French West Indies. Thanks a lot, Bevil.
Thank you, Kevon. And as we all are, the issue that you raised about getting more organizations across the region registering for and setting up their own autonomous networks is actually one of the keys to growing successful internet exchange points across the region. You can't connect to an exchange point directly if you don't have an ASN. And ASNs also represent part of the resilience, infrastructure resilience conversation that we've been having as RIRs and as a technical community across the region. So those 2 points I thought were key to those listening in, trying to understand how do you grow at least the local component of the internet exchange point, and of course attracting the foreign content and bringing it closer to home will also be part of that. But there's another aspect of the network and the infrastructure discussion that I'm hoping that my colleague Jean-Sebastien will be able to address, and that is the build out of the local networks and all of the smaller parts that connect to ensure that the infrastructure is in place for services to be delivered locally. Jean, if you can introduce yourself and share with us some of your perspectives on the subject. Thanks.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Jean-Sebastien Hamlet. So I'm a territorial councillor of the Collectivité of St. Martin. So I've been elected in 2017, and my mandate is up to 2022. I'm in charge of new technology and audiovisual. My personal background is an IT background, so I've been developing applications mainly for the public sector. So I've been in that field since 2007. And 10 years after, I decided to be on the other side of the decision makers as a territorial councillor. And I was recently certified data protection officer in 2019 from the Institute of Sciences Po in Paris. So today my intervention is mainly going to be about explaining the challenges we've faced with the telecom infrastructure since the passage of Hurricane Irma. I'm not a specialist of the telecom or internet exchange points, but as a government, we understand the needs of the population. We understand the benefits of considering IXPs and having a resilient infrastructure also for better services to the population. So I'm going to share my screen. I have a little presentation where I'm going to go through what we faced like challenges since Hurricane Irma. And we are pretty proud of what we've accomplished to deploy FTTH on the whole territory. So I'm gonna share my screen right now. So yes, in 2017, it has been a turning point in the history of St. Martin. I'm not going to go really on the social aspect of it. I mean, the passage of Irma in the Caribbean, we saw it was really destructive. I'm going to stick on the infrastructure part because we have made the decision, well, a drastic decision to put all the networks on the ground. Because after the passage of Irma, we had about 90 kilometers of aerial supports that dropped. So the aerial supports were mostly used for electrical wires, but the service providers were also passing their their networks on those supports, I guess, to reduce cost and to reach out to the end users in certain neighborhoods. So after the passage of around 90 kilometers of those aerial network dropped, and we as government and also the electrical company, they decided to put everything underground. So that implicated that the service providers that were on those area posts were out of business or maybe were cut off totally from one or more neighborhoods. So we faced with several neighborhoods who didn't have telephone services, internet services for quite a while. Therefore, we had to do a census with all the service providers and get them to sit around a table and define a common strategy on how we could put back up those networks, but in a more resilient way. We wanted everything to be on the ground. And we also wanted to make 100% of homes and businesses in St. Martin eligible for very high-speed internet by optical fiber. So that was a challenge for government, a challenge for the service providers, because we decided that no network would go back up on the post because we wanted the island to be more resilient. We wanted the citizens to get back up quickly or faster after hurricanes or natural disasters, etc. That was quite a big challenge for the service providers because that implicated a 12 million euro investment, overall investment, that the service providers could not deal with individually. Therefore, they needed government to come up with a plan in order to meet the challenges. So on my slide, you're seeing quickly the aftermath overall on the island, but I'm going to really concentrate on the telecom networks. And so our new challenges was really to deploy that network as quickly as possible, as resilient as possible, to serve the population. So we came up with a great initiative that took about 2 years of consultation with the authorities, the state authorities, with the local service providers in our government administration. And we came up with a solution that, let me get the right term. We came up with a law that, well, we found a law that permitted the collectivity to hold a stake in a commercial company having for purpose the establishment and the exploitation of passive electronic communication infrastructure. That means that that new entity, which is composed of European funds and private funds. So we have as stakeholders 40% of the collectivity, so the government. We have 20% of local operators, and we have another 40% of the CDC, which is a bank held by the state. We got about 6.5 million euros from subsidies, European subsidies, also to start those underground networks. And this company has seen the light about a month ago. And the goal of this company is to dig the trenches for the underground housing for the fiber optic. And therefore, the operators would just have to pass their fiber to reach out to the neighborhoods. Because the heaviest cost for the operators was really to do the public works. So digging the trenches and putting down the housing and everything for the fiber. So that was a 2 years project that has seen the light about a month ago. We are very proud of it. And we are supposed to have 100% FTTH network by 2022. Now with the pandemic, it has been pushed back probably to the first trimester of 2023. And our challenges also, part of our challenges was really accelerating also e-governance and the digital services. And since the pandemic hit, it has been more pressing again with all the restrictions concerning the pandemic. I'm just going to go through a few numbers on St. Martin. Sorry, I have my graph that is in French. But since the passage of Hurricane Irma, of course, we've had a significant drop in employment. And the years after we faced the tourism industry, faced a few drawbacks with local problems. And then in 2020, with the pandemic, we saw that our island that was mainly on the tourism industry got really impacted. And we were facing difficulties in terms of providing services to the population. And I'm talking about, how to say, I'm talking about easy services, like let's say like for medical services or even for homeschooling on the education field. If citizens had requests for maybe social security or services for government, everything had to be done electronically. And the pandemic showed that it's more a need, it's an important need to develop this digital economy pretty rapidly. Sorry, I think I had a problem with my mic. Okay. Yeah. You hear me?
Yes, we are. We are hearing you, and you have 5 minutes though. We almost through the slides.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so that on our side, the first strategy that we had for the territory was really to have a resilient infrastructure. before talking about developing e-services, the government of St. Martin for the past years has been improving in terms of their internal solutions, internal platforms to deal with their internal procedures, to make it easier to communicate between services and to communicate with the population. We also did a great step a couple of years ago where we went to Office 365, where we have all the administrative agents, all the elected officials that use those type of accounts in the cloud. And that enabled us to have territorial meetings, for example, during the pandemic off-site. We did also a great improvement in reducing costs for paper, since we're using intranets for territorial meetings, for example. So more and more, the government officials are seeing the benefits of the digital transformation. So today, it's not a question of if we're going to that transition. It's mostly when, how, and how fast we're gonna be transiting to that. So I'm gonna stop my presentation at this point. It was really just to show that on St. Martin, our strategy until 2023 is really going to be about having that resilient backbone, FTTH backbone on the island, and in parallel, starting maybe a survey on the type of e-services that we could deploy in different sectors on the island.
Very, very good. Let me ask the other panelists to also turn on their videos so that we can take the question from Dexter, which I think is a relevant question, and just have a closing discussion before handing over to Nigel Casimir. Dexter from Trinidad and Tobago, I believe, has asked, how is the marketing push for foreign cloud services versus local cloud services due to lower rates and perceived better security affect the deployment of IXPs and other internet infrastructure in the region? Brent, is that one you want to tackle? Is Brent still with us? All right, so looks like we don't have Brent. Any of the other panelists want to take that question? How does the marketing push for foreign cloud services versus local cloud affect deployment of IXPs? And I imagine Dexter is referring there to Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and the like. Here we go, Brent.
Hey guys, sorry, I had a little technical difficulty there, guys, but I'm actually back online now.
Are you able to hear the question?
So could we just repeat it again, Bevil?
How is the marketing push for foreign cloud services versus local cloud services going to affect deployment of exchange points and other internet infrastructure in the region? And I'm assuming this question, which is from Dexter Boswell Innes, is referring to the big push by vendors such as Amazon, Microsoft, Google to governments directly and to private sector. How does that affect the internet exchange point use and utility in the region?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And this is a question that came up tons of times before. The challenge here, well, there are two things. First off, is that the content produced by these large players, these large CDNs, it's going to be tough for us as a smaller Caribbean unit to build out that sort of competent content. but there is a collaborative side of it, right? At the end of the day, these CDNs will always try to push, their content, whether it's over the top or sort of collocate at your IX. So it's a sort of win-win. I think it's a case where, we try in the Caribbean try to build applications and content specific to our needs, and not try to, compete with, what we call the big guys. At least just collaborate, and you at the end of the day, it all comes down to end user habits and patterns. They're gonna access that content anyway, so it's even better if you have it at your internet exchange. So I think that's the benefit we get. But at the same time, we need to sort of build applications and local content that is more applicable to us. I really hope that sort of helps, and I hope I didn't stray too much. But again, this is a discussion that it's you can chat on for hours.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to start the response. It's related to a question being asked by Rudy Daniel, what is the view on IXP infrastructure contributing to the current data sovereignty discussion? When you consider that companies, Caribbean-based companies like Belize Cloud, Carib Cloud based in the Bahamas, have been promoting exactly what you're saying, Brent, the location or domestication of not just content, but also services like Google Cloud and Amazon Web Services within the region. It does really raise this issue of how do the IXs help support, relate to ongoing conversations around data sovereignty. Any comments, Kevon, Junior?
Yeah,
or Sebastien?
Yes, I wanted to hear Brent's, I was interested in hearing Brent's comment to the first and second question as well. The thing is, Brent spoke about the content side of it, but there's also the software development, entrepreneurship side of it, because to the question that was posed, the fact is that all those large cloud service providers, whether they're Amazon and Google, etc., Azure, they really all their hosted content is outside of the region. The closest point might be somewhere in West Virginia. All right, so that has an impact on the latency in terms of performance. Most of our organizations, government institutions, even software development firms use a lot of Microsoft products. All right, and most of their clients are tenanted and hosted outside of the region, and so that does impact latency, that does impact the performance of applications and stuff. So we need to find a way to, and it's tied into what Brent said, to develop local applications, local content that require local hosting, and so we have to find the balance between we're using the Azure platforms and stuff to develop our products and technologies, but we need to also think locally as well, and also encourage the cloud providers to also catch their software stack or development stack locally in the region as well. So that's a really interesting question.
Okay, so we're now. Yeah, no, we're now at the 3 p.m. mark. And I think, guys, you all have presented a multi-dimensional look at the issue of Caribbean infrastructure. Sebastien, I really was glad to hear about that layer, the government services, the domestic build-out considerations that have been taking place in the French Caribbean. Oftentimes, discussions about the Caribbean internet don't find references from the French Caribbean or the Netherlands Antilles, and it was good to hear what's happening in the French Caribbean and how much it relates very relevantly to what is taking place in the English-speaking Caribbean. And I'm sure we would be hearing more from you over in the coming months as we build out the internet exchange points in the French Caribbean. And I'm hoping as well that the experience that the groups such as CaribNOG and CARPIF are learning, and the experiences that they're building will be of benefit to the initiatives being undertaken in your region, in your sub-region. That's it for me. I want to just ask the panelists any closing single sentence or single statement comments as we conclude. Let's start with Kevon from LACNIC, AKA the beard.
Yes, thanks very much, Bevil. In terms of a closing comment or a closing message, simply put, we do encourage everyone to find out more and to get internet numbers directly from us. And as I mentioned before in my presentation, there's a lot of value to be derived from that, especially when we think about where we want our Caribbean internet economy to grow and develop.
Excellent. So as Nigel Casimir said on the opening, internet governance matters, and now we can say network autonomy matters as well. Let's get our ASNs and get those autonomous networks across the region. Josh, Sebastien, it was really a pleasure having you. Any closing comments from you, sir?
Yes, it was really a pleasure, and I'm getting more and more knowledge about the internet exchange, and it's totally in our strategy. Right now, we're on the infrastructure layer, and then, of course, with the e-services, we will have to talk about reducing costs also to the citizens, and maybe getting more government incentives to get more bandwidth on submarine cables. But if we produce local contents, we could already provide better services and see new businesses rise on the island. So I'm very happy to be part of this panel and get more information about that. And thanks to everyone for your presentation.
Glad to have you. And keep in mind that local IXs are not just for local traffic exchange, they're also local bandwidth factories. So whenever you're considering how to get more bandwidth available to local customers, the IXP actually is the solution to that. With that, I'll turn to Brent McIntosh. Brent, always a pleasure having you in discussions such as these. Any closing comments?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think this platform, again, is doing an excellent job in terms of outreach. You know, I'm thinking our next target, we need to get, you know, regional ISP executive technical leaders, you know, on these sort of discussions, because we need them to build into their digital strategy that an IX is a very complementary part of their core network. So, you know, this is what I'm looking for. So again, thanks.
Excellent. Now, you would not have known this, but I was actually going to pre-announce that we will be having a 6th Caribbean Interconnection and Peering Forum, CARPIF 6, in October or very early November of this year, virtually, of course. But we do believe that given the nature of the conversation and interest in critical internet infrastructure in the region, the time is right to have just that audience, the executives, the content owners, in a conversation around what's happening and what can be done to accelerate further infrastructure build out. So look forward to hearing more on that on the carpif.net, carpif.net website when the date and time will be announced, and the agenda, of course, for CARPIF 6, looking at accelerating Caribbean internet infrastructure. The last of the speakers represents the Caribbean Telecommunications Union, which started this whole thrust and spotlight on Caribbean internet infrastructure. And so I wanted to leave Junior's comments for last. Since you were the first, Junior, tell us, any final closing remarks?
Yes, thank you, Bevil. I mean, I concur with everything everybody said. The thing is collaboration for us. It's all about multi-stakeholder approach, and we need to ramp it up. You know, we have continued to work over the years with ARIN, with CaribNOG, with CARPIF, you know, LACNIC, all these stakeholders, but we really need to, and now we're extending to, we see the need for governments to have the IXP or critical infrastructure as part of their national policy. It has to be on the national policy agenda, and that's what we're pushing for. So that collaboration among these stakeholders in the region would certainly help us with advance that cause.
Excellent. Well, there you have it, folks. Different stakeholders, different angles of sight, but a common purpose to accelerate the development of Caribbean internet infrastructure. Gentlemen, thank you very much.